Hello and welcome to Community Update. My name is Omar El Toum. Africa has made a lot of history in the 2022 World Cup. To help review the continent's performance in the tournament is Martins Ainabe. Welcome, Martins.
Thank you, Omar. It's a pleasure to be here.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
How would you rate Africa's performance in the tournament?
Africa has taken this tournament by storm. I mean, their performance by the continent in this process has been completely amazing. They have been electrifying. They shocked everyone, and especially with Morocco making it all the way to the semi-finals, I think everyone has looked at the continent a little bit different. They've shook the foundations of what is normal, and what is structured, and how people perceive the African nations, and they've done really well. Very proud of the output of the African nations in this tournament.
Right. So, which match or matches in particular stand out to you?
Okay, coming into this World Cup 2022, it was unique for many, many reasons. One of them is that it's coming in at the end of the year, which had never been done before, different reasons in Qatar, where it was going to be hosted, being hosted in Middle East as well. And everyone thought that it was going to be something different. Everyone was expecting a shake-up to the normal structure, and boy, did it deliver. In terms of a shake-up, the African nations going in, we had a bit of a debate about the fact that there was a restriction of just only 5 African nations going. It's happy to announce that, that's changed. There's going to be 9 going into the next World Cup. So that's fantastic news. But, with these 5 nations going in, these 5 powerhouses of Africa, it was bound to change up things. It was bound to do. There are a lot of expectations. We had Senegal, we had Cameroon, we had Ghana, Morocco, and Tunisia. Countries that have made it in by merit, causing multiple upsets on the way there, but they did it. And, once they got there, taking away all of the inter-tribal out of it and everything else, we were fully supporting behind them. And then when they came into the competition, I have to admit, the first games, there was a bit of a lull. The fizz was taken out. I think the expectation and the fear and everything else, I think most of them either drew or lost the first games. And everyone was looking at it and thinking, are they just going to do what African nations have done in this competition before? And then it started. Senegal kicked into gear. You had, Cameroon put in a good performance as well. You had Ghana come up and show them what it's all about. And then Morocco, solid defensively, amazing attacking as well. And it just started to click for the African nations. Second round through, African nations were beginning to show what they were all about, what we know they're capable of doing.
Right. So what lessons can Africa learn from this World Cup?
So lessons that can be learned. Firstly, trust your own. All of the managers from all of the African nations were all local boys. They were all local managers that had come through. When I say local, I mean they had the international pedigree, the international experience, but they were coming internally, which was a first for the African nation. Now you can imagine, having the World Cup for so long and still not having a situation like this. And this was a point of pride and honor for the continent, but then going beyond that as well. Now looking at what the African nations did, the preparation that went in. There was a different sense, a sense of unity within most of the nations and the teams when they were going in. There was a lot of egos that were taken out. There were a lot of issues that were said. A lot of people focused on the fact that, we're going in there, we're not going to have all of these all these big egos and troubles within the camps. They were very, very level-headed and calm. And, they managed, and the preparation was fantastic. The way they prepared, the way they walked into these tournaments, they were ready. I mean, and they didn't, I think the greatest issue that they probably had in this tournament were injuries. And that you can't do anything about. That's where you want to be. You want to be in a position where the factors that delay you or cause a disruption are things that you can't do anything about. But then even that said, we had nations like Senegal, that their biggest player, Sadio Mane, everyone was talking about Sadio Mane. We were hoping that he'd be there. But Senegal still did it. They went out on the first stage without Sadio Mane. And that speaks volumes, because there are other players. There was Mendy, there was Koulibaly. There are other players that are in the team, and they all stepped up, including the players that are not more internationally renowned. And no other team epitomized that than Morocco. Because before the game, before Morocco came into this competition, I remember we sat here and we had this conversation and we were talking about the fact that, when we talked about all the other nations, the focus was on the bigger names, the Ghanas, the Cameroons, all these other nations, but nobody was really talking about Morocco. and they galvanized. They really showed stern stuff in there. And, you know, I'm sure we'll go in and talk about, you know, we talked about before what game really stood out. I think Morocco v France. Right. I know they lost. That was the only, and here's the stat that is really interesting about that game. That was the only game where Morocco, I think, had conceded in the tournament. Where, and someone might try and correct me there and say, no, actually they conceded 1-0 in one of the opening games, but they scored an own goal. So technically, you know, no one scored against them technically. So that was the first game that they actually conceded a goal. And you could see defensively, Morocco up until that point were known for their defense, the unity, the energy, the non-stop running. But here's the thing: in that game against France, Morocco not only defended for 90 minutes, Morocco also pushed back the world champions and kept them at the edge of their seats for most of that game. They weren't quiet. They weren't they weren't standing in the background and doing nothing. Morocco gave it to France, and France had to sit up, and really they needed their world-class stars and even some of their other players to operate as a unit. And you have to give credit to them. You have to give credit.
No, you know, I definitely think it was a win for Africans. But I also think that, you know, it showed us that no one player makes a team.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And like you stated, Morocco did that beautifully. You know, it was all about the team, the team effort, us winning together.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So what's next for African soccer?
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. Absolutely right with the whole unity. And I think this is the theme going forward as well. I think when it comes to the African nation and the African countries, what they need to look at is that as a prerequisite going into any tournament, unity within the nations is paramount. Preparation before the games, you know, the structures, the foundation to be able to develop and grow is absolutely paramount. We need the federations, we need the football associations and organizations within these countries to invest. But I mean, at the end of the day, one country's success, or, you know, you need to be able to start. And the formula that, for example, Senegal used was that, you know, about 10 years ago, Senegal were not giants in football in Africa. They weren't even, you know, they weren't really a footballing nation in that sense. But what they did is that they realized the state of the footballing structure within the nation. And what they did, they went back to the grassroots. They started to invest on youth. Now, Africa, the thing is that Africa's population is mostly made up of the youth. And we need the country, then the institutions in the country, the governments, to focus on the youth. If they focus on building up that youth structure, they focus on bringing out the next generation and create a conveyor belt where younger children from as young as 5 and 4 are being taught how to play football. They're being taken to community centers where they can play. They're being shown by coaches, and even those that are in a prominent position right now are beginning to give back. You know, the money that is being invested by these, and a lot of these footballers, and I have to give credit to the African footballers, the ones that make it always reinvest. They are not, a lot of them are not just interested in buying themselves fancy cars and doing all sorts. They are interested in giving back. They come from humble beginnings, and a lot of them get that, and they give back to their nations. And I want to encourage them to keep doing that. What we will need are those institutions to let the money go. They're not that money is not meant for them to buy cars. It's not meant for them to buy houses. It's meant for them to invest in the next generation. When these children come out, when these next generations start to come through, the nation will begin to develop. The nation will begin to grow. So what do we need to do? Build infrastructure for the next generation. Get these players and these people that have come through the system, the current system, and have made it. Let them start to reinvest and push backwards. If we sort out that level, the youth, and how they play, developing the African style of play, the strong, the physical, yet the skillful and the distributive, the energy, the non-stop energy. You know, one of the other things that played a great factor in this World Cup was the weather. You know, under that heat and under that, you know, that is our element. We're comfortable. So let our players, and it's in our genes, it's in our genetics. Let's come out and play in that way. Let that African DNA be taught to the next generation and let them begin to progress it right the way through. They have the European style, North American style, South American style. Why don't we have the African style? And why don't we grow, develop that? And I think that is a challenge for the CAF and the African Federation unions and the local ones as well. Develop the internal infrastructure and watch what comes out of it. A saying that I mentioned this to you earlier, but a saying that I have is that competence builds confidence.
Yes.
Now, what do I mean by that? Competence in your craft, diligence in your craft, working hard, doing the extra runs, working the extra hours, working on the technique, the love, the passion of the sport. This no more nepotism in our sports, right? No more, because no more sights of seeing where you have a coach coming in with players, but they have more officials than players. In the sense that you're having the family of government officials in those coaches on those flights. Stop that. What we need are the players, the next generation. What we want to see is that when next, the African nations are played or the qualifying games are played, no more violence in the stadiums. But what we should be seeing is a conglomeration of unity, support. You should have the young players from all around the continent, locally as well. They should bring up the local infrastructure. We should have a good balance of international players playing in Europe, South America, all around the world, but also local players as well in those teams. When you start to seed that in, the experience starts to pass on. And then the quality starts to come up. Then you start to have surprises where no one can see. Because at the end of the day, football, the love and the beauty of football is the fact that it's mano a mano. One person versus another. If you run the amount of miles, it doesn't matter whether you run it on a professional pitch in Halifax here, or you run it on the streets of Lagos, you run a mile. Right? And we need them to, everyone on the youth level all the way up, to run the mile that they need to run the 10 miles that they need to run, work on the skills that they need to work on, whether it's on the sands or on the pitches. And that will bring up the skill level, that will bring up the anticipation, brings up the competence. And then when you look at that, when you look at the man versus man, you know that you're both at the same level. Then it's all down to, the confidence. That confidence will come into the game. That confidence will come into the structure and allow our players to rise to the next level. We've seen an African nation make it to the semi-finals of the World Cup. Coming into these games, if you had said that was a possibility, you'd have been laughed under the table.
Absolutely.
Today we stand and it has happened. What happens next? The finals. What happens next? The World Cup. It's coming to Africa.
How do you feel about the sentiment of, even though, like you said earlier, in terms of teams, we were only 5, but it seemed like there was a lot of Africans playing, in this tournament. How do you feel about that sentiment?
That's a perfect statement there, because, I look at it and I think of the fact that, I like to call the French team, and no offense to the French team, but
you're start some trouble.
I start some trouble. I know I'm controversial. There you go. I call that the next African team, because you look at the players right across the team, and there are a lot of players of African descent. And this is as a result of Africans moving, globalization, moving around the world. But you cannot deny it. Kylian Mbappe is of Cameroonian descent. You look right across the team, and a lot of them have African names, African surnames. So, Thuram, different names like that. And you look at it and you think, it's a source of pride. And I think can you imagine if you had a situation where all of those players were playing in their countries? They're playing in their countries of origin. Now, obviously, we have other factors in there in terms of, facilities and everything that I've spoken about before. But can you imagine if those players now were actually in their native countries? It is possible. There are lots of wealthy Africans all over the continent who, I think I'd say to them, if you're watching this, if you're hearing this, invest in your own. There's no point, having all of the talent and all of the wealth in your own country, yet you have to travel out to see it. Would you not like to watch the Premier League quality football being played in your own doorstep? You drive out of your house 30 minutes down the road and you're watching a Premier League level game, or a Serie A league level game, or a Ligue 1 league level game. You're watching it in your own doorstep. It saves you money longer term. But also, here's the thing, it means that your own children and your children's children can see that. Look, them playing in, and you know, I'm not saying that it's bad for them to play in foreign countries. Look, even if you play in a foreign country, you know, you could still represent your home country. You know, you look at, for example, I looked at, you know, the country, USA, you know, and I looked at George Weah's son playing for the USA instead of Liberia. And George Weah is the president of Liberia.
Right.
Now, you see, look, look, for whatever reasons that has happened, it's happened. But also, if you think about the thought process around that, it's a shame, because it would have been amazing. Can you imagine George Weah's son playing for Liberia just as his father did? That would be the next generation, meaning that there's a foundation that has been set.
Right.
You know, look, every African that comes out and plays is an idol, in terms of an idol for the next generation, is a beacon of hope for the next generation. For every one George Weah that comes out of Africa, there's 100 others that attempt that same journey, or 100,000.
Right.
That is the level of inspiration that we see.
Right.
So don't underestimate, you know, the Hakimis and the Ziyech's and all these players, and, you know, the Sadio Manes, the Mendy's, you know, you're looking at the all of these African players, you know, Victor Osimhen, all of these guys playing all around the world. What you are doing is inspiring the next generation. And, you know, when you do that, when you carry that mantle, you know, it means that someone else behind you stands on the shoulder of giants. So, you know, we need to continue to push in that direction.
No, absolutely. So, Martins, thank you very much for coming and talking to us today.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to have been able to share this platform with yourself. And yeah, no, as I said before, subscribe to the Community Update channel. If you like what you've heard and like what you've seen, please come back, hit the notification button, hit the like button, comment, subscribe again, and come back. You know, your participation, your involvement in this really helps us, takes us very far. And also M4 Media as well. You know, listen up, subscribe. Thank you very much. God bless. See you later.
Join Martins and I and a couple of other community sports enthusiasts as we bring you updates on local, national, and international sporting activities. So subscribe to this channel today and give this video a thumbs up. Till we come your way again, I am Omar. Bye for now.